Put your hands together for Shri Anand Sharma ji, former Minister of Commerce and Industry, and Mr. Sunil Kant Munjal.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the closing session of the 2 days of hopefully invigorating, intellectually invigorating, involving, and fun set of sessions. I hope you all had a good 2 days. I want to specially welcome our chief guest for this session. Mr. Anand Sharma is not just an old friend. He is a unique individual, a thinking politician, one who reached the pinnacle starting from his student days as a student leader, an acknowledged legal expert, stepped into politics, took on roles in the external affairs side, and then became a friend for industry and the economy in India. Many of us knew him earlier, but when he took on the role of commerce and industry, that's when the bond with industry, I believe for you, Anand, really strengthened. And he was truly an individual who worked with no vested interest. The only interest I saw in his work was India and Indians. Incidentally, that is the theme of the Mindmine Institute, is India, Indians, Indian economy, and India's global relations. Actually, all the 4 things that you have worked at. I thought it would be interesting for us to just have a conversation, Anand, to talk about a little bit about what is going on in India. Before we get there, I'd just like to tell you about the interesting 2 days that we've had. We've had 18 sessions since yesterday morning, and we've had 57 or 58 leaders from different walks of life as panelists and speakers in these 2 days. We've had sessions on economy, on industry, on global trade, looking at the WTO perspective, looking at India's position on health, on the possibilities of future black swan events and what you can do about it. We also had a session on education, which is something close to all our hearts. We had a series of conversation which looked at, does India need repurposing right now? The 2 years that we've gone through, in some sense, has been an absent period of our lives because we couldn't physically meet family or friends or colleagues, but at the same time, it was a time for reawakening. It was a time for introspection. It was time for people to reassess the priorities they hold in their own lives. Many people said, I don't want to do this anymore because reality is my priority is actually something else, but I was doing this only because I was going on doing this. So it made us stop and listen to ourselves. I think in some ways, it also made people more thoughtful because during the pandemic, especially in the first few weeks and months, we saw something that I hope humanity does not have to see again. We saw the worst that nature can do to us, but we stood the test. It also showed the best of humanity in people. People helping each other without any motive, without vested interest. People taking risk. Because there was a fear at that time that even by going out, you can hurt yourself, you can harm yourself. So it was not just the doctors and nurses who, of course, got praised, got appreciated, got recognized around the globe. It was the policeman in the corner, the postman, the delivery boys and girls who were bringing packages to our homes, the sabziwalas. There were people who genuinely put their lives at risk because that was the belief at that time. Please remember, many people, and I know people, close friends of ours, you might know some of them, who didn't go out of their home for months on end. it also brought us a new way of looking at our relationships. We saw a very high divorce rate take place, by the way. As you know, in the middle of this, when couples got to spend more time, they actually discovered each other for the first time in some cases. But in many cases, it brought people much closer. So we saw both things happening. One of the consequences of all of this rethinking was what we call the Great Resignation. Across the globe, across countries, across sectors, across verticals, people got up and left what they were doing. From established jobs and roles that they had, they just got up and went. Even if you look at what happened in India, in the migration, all the migratory workers and labor, both unskilled and semi-skilled, that works in the urban centers, when they left at the beginning of the shutdown, only about between 60 and 70% have come back. The rest have decided not to come back at all. Either their families were not ready to let them go, or they themselves realigned themselves to a new way of living. The Narega scheme, which has been expanded, actually came to become a safety net. Because when they stayed there, they all at least know that they can get 100 days of work or whatever is the current number. But it's changing social structures as well. I'm not sure we're thinking enough about the change that is actually taking place. We are in the middle of it as we speak. Right now, the change is currently taking place. In this very period, we reassessed our old education system. The new education policy got announced. We have relooked at our healthcare delivery system, both in the urban centers, all the way from the primary healthcare centers to the large tertiary centers. And we're trying to see if we can create a better connect. With a slow start in the early period, India did a phenomenal job in the vaccination drive that we launched. Not only launched it for India, we supplied to many parts of the world. So we've gone through an amazing period of transition right now. And these are some of the questions that we asked of the panelists, and there were some wonderful answers, and some questions were answered with questions. So you need to do a little bit more thinking. Some were confusing answers. Some were clear and definite. Some said this could happen or this could happen. And by the way, that's okay too. And I think that's one more realization that many of us are coming to accept now, that in life, it may be better as an attitude for us to live more peacefully and a more satisfied life if you accept that this is okay and that is okay too. Because too often, we take hard stands and then try and fight not just for our position, but to get others to accept our point of view. The reality is, this is the beauty of this planet. This is the beauty of our nation. Our amazing diversity of kinds, types, cultures, faiths, types, cuisines, architecture, design of the textiles. This is the richness of what we have to offer. So if we start to celebrate this, rather than to try and get everybody to look alike, I think we will all be better off. We will certainly be more satisfied. We will certainly have a happier nation. And I think some of this came through in the sessions that we had. So I want to ask you, Anand, because you've had an amazing experience. You've dealt, at one time I remember your favorite friends were, to push all of us, why don't you look at Africa? You know, this is a place for the future. This is a place which needs and deserves India's attention. And then China came along and actually hogged up that space. And Africans were telling us, what's wrong with you? We've had a relationship with you for so long. China is the one giving us aid. They are the ones who are helping us build our infrastructure. We would rather work with you, but we didn't quite take up that space fully. Do you think that was a missed opportunity? Because India is now getting back and rebuilding some of those bridges. I'm going to go all over the place with you. I'm not only on one topic, okay? It's on.
Well, thank you, Sunil, for inviting me and for the kind words. I was really excited when I saw the invite and also the theme that you had chosen, and you referred in detail, so I don't have to repeat, about the repurposing India post-pandemic. You very rightly said, before I come to your question, that none of us thought that we'll see it in our lifetime. We had read about the plague, we had read about the Spanish flu, but we never thought it will visit us. And with such vengeance, and the entire humanity, irrespective of the leaps that we have made in science, technology, creating infrastructure, having more resources, humanity was vulnerable. All nations were rattled. It was the biggest disruption which the world has seen in a century. And whether we have come out of it or not, I'm sure people would have talked about it, but we have to reflect the fallout, the damage done, the families ruined, the people lost. And I think about it that there is a silent trauma in the society. We have many issues which had come up during that period, both the challenges and the strengths, and you refer to very rightly. Perhaps we need to put minds together. Surely India is doing it, other societies are doing, institutions, businesses are doing, and particularly the youth, who are the stakeholders in the future. For them, perhaps this is one lesson which will give them strength, hope to move forward. Now, coming to your question, specific question, Africa has been important for India historically. We have been connected with Africa for centuries. Well before you had the aeroplane or the air journeys, with the monsoons tide, our sailors will move with the boats, with the commodities, spices, the barter trade used to be there, and they'll land at distant places in East Africa and going up to the tip of Southern Africa, not South Africa per se, but Tanzania, yes, Zanzibar, yes, Madagascar, other places. And it was a very rich exchange which took place. There has also been cultural exchange. And in the contemporary times, so if you say the last century, the political engagement of India, our own experiences and the shared experiences with Africa motivated us to engage with them more. We were colonized, not allowed to take any decisions about our future, robbed of our richness and resources. Come to think of it, that a country which in 1700 had 24 to 27% share of the world's GDP, and where we were left after the British left, and even today we are somewhere there, 3 to 4%. So it's a huge, huge setback for us. But Africa suffered the same fate, brutalities. It's very difficult to say that which empire was benign or where the brutalities were less, but Africa, yes. When we talk of King Leopold and others, and how this is not only it's the entire Europe, for that matter, Portuguese, Spanish conquerors who plundered Africa. But India engaged with them with a different mind. Especially, we cannot forget the father of our nation and the gratitude which we owe to Africa, and South Africa in particular, which made him what he became, to come back and challenge the might of the British Empire, the Mahatma, using those potent tools of nonviolence. Now, that's part of history. So the goodwill for India, and after our independence, It's important, especially for the young people, to know that we were the first country to impose sanctions on apartheid South Africa. We had almost 6% of our world trade with South Africa. We have a large Indian diaspora there, but we cut off. After that, we supported proactively and also in solidarity with the struggle, not only in South Africa against apartheid, but also against colonialism in other parts of Africa. And there was hardly any liberation struggle in the 60s, 70s, right up to when it ended the fights that we didn't support. Now, coming to the 21st century, China and India have different models, different approach. We started way back in 1963, somewhere around that. I can see Ambassador Rajan sitting here, who was a special envoy at one point of time. When we started with the ITEC program, tens of thousands of students from Africa, since then and until now, have come, have been educated in our institutions. The young men have trained in our military academies. Many of them went back to become the prime ministers, heads of states, chiefs of the army. And it's still there, a large number of people in Africa, those who are occupying key positions. Somewhere the India connection was there. We didn't have the resources of China. But we adopted a different approach. China constructs huge buildings, but they bring in their own labor in Africa. That also triggers resentment. Whereas what we did was giving the lines of credit for them to build their own projects using wherever they could, their own resources, their own people. And that has been appreciated. Not that it's only China. Europe has also, once again, taken very aggressive interest in Africa. So is America setting up a separate command.
I want to bring you to a slightly different perspective now. India's aggressive push for bilateral trade agreements. When you were in the ministry, at that time also a few of them got signed. And we have continued now also with the UK after the Brexit, with Europe, and a whole bunch of them. In your mind, is multilateralism completely dead? Or is this a step towards that?
No, I won't say that. But let me just make one point before about what I was talking on Africa. One thing I must flag here, the Pan-African E-Network project, which perhaps is a shining example of India's engagement, where we gave our own satellites. We established the Pan-African E-Network, linking 48 countries in Africa. This was entirely at our own cost, a gift from India and its people, India's government, to the people of Africa. And that helped them overcome the digital divide. We have linked universities in India with universities in Africa, super specialty hospitals in India with hospitals in all regions in Africa. This also has been a transformative change in teleeducation and telemedicine. So our models of engagement are different, definitely, and we think that we will win because we generate more goodwill. It's not exploitative. Even if there's Indian entities, you are a business leader, have gone there, Sunil, and they believe in value addition, not plundering their resources by investing there, establishing manufacturing bases. Now coming to your question, which is very significant. In fact, not some. I'm very happy to say that most of India's trade agreements, which we signed, except for the one which we already had with Singapore, were done when I had the responsibility as Commerce and Industry Minister. And we took some of those decisions at a critical time. After the financial crisis in 2008, 9, and when the economies were in turbulence, all economies were shaken. We took bold decisions. We stepped out and engaged. Our wisdom was questioned, especially when we, in 2009, within a week, we signed back-to-back agreements, first with India, ASEAN, which eventually evolved during our time into a comprehensive economic partnership agreement. And that gave us the opening, which I am still very keen on, that this government has let it drop off the table. I'm talking of the RCEP, which was ASEAN plus 6, which China was resisting, blocking our entry for long. And once we signed with ASEAN, that opened the path for us to engage with the larger Asia-Pacific region. Because we signed quickly with Japan, with South Korea, and we brought them in the loop to support us for what was used to be known as ASEAN plus 6, but what became RCEP. But we signed with Malaysia, we signed with Indonesia. We were almost there with the EU, but it was not because of India that we lost that agreement. It was the obduracy of the EU bureaucracy that let it fall off the table. Post-Brexit, the situation is different. I'm happy that there is a continuity in government in a country. Change of governments does not make disruptions. What I want to say, because you asked me about multilateralism. Multilateralism will not die with the bilaterals or the plurilateral agreements. As long as those who are signing these agreements, mindful of their own strength and economic interests, are also looking at the interconnected world. The world today has changed. It cannot be, irrespective of the agreements reached, the global dimension cannot be lost. That's where the WTO, which was established way back in 1998, the countries which were votaries for establishing the WTO were also not keen on strengthening it further and more keen on plurilaterals or the regional agreements. That will continue and both can coexist. But one last thing I want to mention, that India can take the credit of having given the lead in ensuring that the first ever and historic agreements at the WTO got signed at the 9th ministerial meeting at Bali in 2013, thanks to us, and we stood our ground. And China joined America and EU against us, but we built a huge coalition of 128 countries. Of the entire Africa came with me, entire Latin America came with us, Caribbean came with us, most of Asia came with us, and we won, and 9 agreements were signed, including the trade facilitation agreement.
Wonderful. I want to take you to another historic visit. When we went to Karachi, Lahore, and Islamabad, that was considered potentially the closest we came, other than the Shimla Agreement time, and one other instance in the last 40 years. That was the closest we came to getting to a full deal with Pakistan. You remember what happened in Karachi when we almost literally walked off and came back to India. What do you think needs to happen for something like that to actually get closed? Because it is not in our interest to have a neighborhood that is troubled, a country which can potentially fail. A reasonably successful Pakistan can only be good for us. And if we can actually open trade and investment between the two, it can tremendously benefit both sides. And we have seen that there are countries with no apparent interest, no commonality, but because of trade and investment, they are able to build not just peace, but actual friendship. If you think back, we've talked of G20 and G7, but the reality is if you look back at the last 12, 15 years, there was a G2. US would not take a decision before talking to China, and they have nothing in common except the trade and investment. Of course, today is a whole different picture now, but what was happening there. So, is that ever a possibility in our lifetimes, you think, for us to build any kind of a bridge with Pakistan?
Well, Sunil, we both are witness to that. And when the decision was taken that we'll go to Pakistan, it was the first visit of and a delegation led by a cabinet minister with the top leaders of the Indian industry. There were enough naysayers, given the problems that we have, the relationship between India and Pakistan. But we held our ground, and here I must give credit to the support that we received from the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. He said, you go ahead. And we had threats, as you are witness to, from the many groups, including Hafiz Saeed. And when we crossed the Wagah border, 109 members strong was the Indian business delegation, the top captains of Indian industry, we the cultural delegation. We chose to cross on foot, but there were, of course, I can share now, 19 jets of Sunil Munjal and other captains of industry had landed in Lahore, and I said Pakistan will be overwhelmed, and those who are opposing the visit there will say that India has come and they are trying to dominate. But we are a bigger country, and that's where we left. I left the plane on which I was traveling, the Indian Air Force One, Embraer, in Amritsar, but later it joined us in Lahore. We were received with much warmth. The Pakistan industry leaders, captains, they were in favor of an improved relationship, better understanding. And I entirely agree with you. It has to be a shared prosperity in South Asia. You cannot expect that we will move and leave the entire neighborhood. It's not only Pakistan, yes, Bangladesh, Nepal. You can't leave them behind. You can't have a country which becomes prosperous and the neighborhood which is so poor. And because of that, you have extremism, or you have insurgency, or you have violence, you have terror groups. If their young people also get more opportunities, access to better opportunities, perhaps things may change there too. But we are witness to the goodwill. We entered into many arrangements, including investment, agreement between the two central banks, also the Power Grid Connect, and opening of more areas. So I'm in favor. I still remain optimistic that one day the goodwill is there. If you think that all people in India hate Pakistan, no. And people in Pakistan hate us or treat us as enemies, people with whom we engaged, no. There is a vast constituency in Pakistan which is liberal, which is democratic, which understands the syncretic culture of this country or the subcontinent. So we will have the fringe groups or extreme groups on both sides. But the wisdom is to take it forward. What you referred to about Karachi is important, perhaps to share, if you agree.
I don't know if it's public knowledge.
I can tell you that no, it is now permissible because
you
it's
know
sold.
better than me if it's public knowledge or not. So
no, there was something, developments took place, the understandings that were there earlier, when my counterpart had come here, and I had specifically asked him that what he was telling me, does it have the support of the state of Pakistan? Not only your government or the Prime Minister, but Pakistan में फौज के बिना कुछ नहीं होता. जो आप एग्रीमेंट हमसे कर रहे हो, वो होगा, वहाँ पर भी उसको वही तवज्जो दी जाएगी, वही इज्जत दी जाएगी. And the answer was yes. Makhdoom Fahim, he is a very, very fine gentleman, and he was a religious, came from a family of religious leaders, and gave us the word. But there was some backtracking because of the internal fissures and pressures. And we had a very big business conclave.
They said, हमने कहा है आप रिलेशनशिप इंप्रूव जरूर कीजिए, हमने ये नहीं कहा आप इतनी जल्दी कीजिए.
No, I'll share with you. I'll share with you that part. Within their own government, the conflict started on what may appear innocuous to us, on MFN status, most favored nation status. Now, all countries who are members of the WTO give to each other the MFN status. Not that it means a lot. You move as per the agreements, as per the agreed tariffs, as per the notified tariffs or the tariffs as they are applied. But Pakistan, those who were opposed to it, they translated it. And what we were told, as you would recall, कि जी हमारे यहाँ पे लोग कहते हैं कि हिंदुस्तान को सब तो पसंदीदा मुल्क कैसे कहते हैं.
वो कहते हैं उर्दू पेपर पढ़ते हैं सब, इसको उर्दू में लिखेंगे तो दिस इज द मीनिंग.
हाँ, सबसे पसंदीदा मुल्क हम हिंदुस्तान को कैसे कहते हैं, और ये प्रॉब्लम आ गई. बट आई मस्ट से टू सुनील इज हियर, they our industry leaders, he in particular, and with Pakistan industry leader, the President Mia Mansha and others, their industry leaders went to Islamabad. We were in a huddle, not sure whether can proceed, because there was a joint commission in Islamabad besides our other engagements, because the main engagements were Lahore, Karachi, and Pindi also, where we had big business conclaves. But luckily, everything was sorted out, agreements were reached. That was a historic
We actually
visit.
helped them coin a new term to use instead.
Yes.
Instead of that, because that term would never fly.
And it was a Kathak troupe, Kadam, from Ahmedabad, which bowled over. जो हम दूसरे लेके गए थे, they somehow could not perform, and our Kathak group had performed during the lunchtime. And that Rahat Fateh Ali Khan, who was there to sing, somehow his throat went wrong. And the Pakistanis then requested us that can we borrow or request you to give us the same Kathak group again. And it went on. I thought it happens only in Akhadau. The dinner, of course, they served both vegetarian and non-vegetarian dishes in very well and separated areas. But it went on until well past midnight. I remember I left around 2:30, but my counterparts and many other, and most of our delegates were still there.
So Anand, thank you very much. You are an enjoyable person to talk to because you have such a wide perspective on things. I know that I can talk to you about Nehru and his philosophy. I can talk to you about what's happening in the world of education or skills. I can also talk to you about what's going on in technology. But our time is up. But despite that, I do want to ask you one more question. One on skills. One of the apparent shortfalls that we have in India right now, one of the hurdles to high growth is lack of skills, lack of sufficient quality skills in India. Formal skills, as you know, we have less than 2% formally skilled in India, whereas in Korea, it's 76% get formal skilling, and there are countries where there are over 90%. So is there an advice you have of how this can be ramped up? Because while we do everything else, unless you have the right ability, right skill and attitude to do things, your attempt to be competitive, to be efficient, and to be cost effective all the time will be very, very hard because you have to compete in a global market, no matter how much countries are pulling back from globalization, but you cannot help but be globally competitive if you want to move forward, if you want the kind of growth that we need and we want.
That's very important as we move forward to address this challenge. It's a huge challenge for India. India is an aspirational country, especially our younger generation, and they've proven that given an opportunity, given the support, they can compete with the best in the world. But we have to find a harmonious balance considering the social reality, complexities, and the economic challenges, especially the large number of poor in India, and the fact that the unorganized sector employs more than 80% of our labor force or workforce. And you have rightly said that the skilled people are very less compared to other countries, and the semi-skilled ones are there, but that too, I do not know the exact percentage, maybe 25%. The rest are unskilled. Now, with the new technologies coming, this is the next industrial revolution, which is already there. We were able to deal with the information technology, those challenges, and leapfrog. We, in fact, overcame the big divide to emerge as leaders in the IT-enabled services globally. But with the AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, 3D printing, how do we prepare? Are we moving at a sufficient pace? We have a challenge here, Sunil. We have the capacity to access, innovate, and assimilate high-end technologies in our manufacturing sector. We have demonstrated it. We have people with minds, we have institutions. But at the same time, R&D remains a concern. And that's where the government and the industry must come together. We are spending as a nation only 1% of our GDP on R&D. And with the industry also coming in, maybe it's 0.75%. So if we have to compete with countries which are developed countries, developed economies, we must invest more in R&D. We must invest much more in education and skills training. I'm afraid so far we are not allocating enough there, and to achieve that objective, you must also have a healthy India. We can't perhaps keep on talking and invest only 0.35% of our GDP in health, even post-pandemic. So these are the issues. If India, I'm sure that there are people who are concerned, people who are in government, people who are making policies, but this should be a priority for the country.
Thank you, Anand. Just for your information, what we are doing in our own family foundation schools, we've started teaching coding in class 2 in all our schools, compulsory for every kid. The idea is that this is like a language. For this new generation, if they do not know coding, they will be at a disadvantage. So like you teach English and Hindi or any other language, we are teaching them coding. And they take to it like this. By class 5 or 6, they're doing projects which are normally done in colleges. So we had a visit from the Vice Chancellor of the Birmingham City University last month. And he said, I can't believe my eyes, that these are kids in class 4, 5, and 6 who are doing these kind of projects and creating things. We've also put up maker labs in all our schools. So they can tinker with stuff, they can make stuff, they can also break stuff. Because that's an amazing way of learning, is to make and break. And so I'm very hopeful for our future. We will have some speed bumps along the way, but I'm a great optimist on India and its promise and potential, which we will continue to achieve as we go along. We have a long distance to go. As was said, we have miles to go and we have promises to keep. But I think the time to realize India's potential is now, is here and now. And with the advent of the kind of technologies that are available and the cost at which they are available and the technical infrastructure that is getting built by the iStack and the whole host of other networks, I think we have a real opportunity to leapfrog a few stages and put ourselves in the position that we need and want. So thank you very much. You have been a great partner of the Mindmine Summit since many years, since the early years when we started. You have attended many, you have opened many, you have closed some of them, and you have attended and been at panels in some. So truly value this friendship. This has been another memorable one because it happened after such a long time. Because of the COVID hiatus that we had to take a break. We also had a wonderful event last evening of the BML Munjal Awards, as we have every summit, as you know, we had the new Vice President of India come and give away the awards, and he gave a wonderful, wonderful, charged up speech, charging everybody up for achieving India's promise. So big thank you, and thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being here with us for 2 days. I hope this was useful, beneficial, and you'll take something back from here.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you very much. And my best wishes to everyone. I too remain an eternal optimist. When I refer to challenges and difficulties, I have faith in our people. And I have faith. It's my belief that there is nothing which is impossible for India and its people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, to mark this occasion, we have a small memento as a token of our gratitude. Would request Mr. Munjal to kindly present it to sir. th edition of the Mindmine Summit. A big thank you. आप सबसे गुजारिश है जो रिमोट कंट्रोल्स हमारे यहाँ पर वोटिंग पैनल के थे उनको कृपया करके सीट्स पर या टेबल्स पर छोड़ दीजिएगा. Also